Going live. Hello. Hey, folks. Welcome back to another episode of DEI in 5. On today's episode, I am joined by my good friend Caren Young, aka the professional adult. If you haven't been introduced to her, you need to go check out her YouTube. You can also check out some other videos that we have posted, collaborative videos that we've posted in the past. We always have good discussions, and you can best bet that today's discussion is not going to be 5 minutes. So, today we are going to be talking about the DEI ban that is happening in Texas that has kind of been flying under the radar, which is really interesting. We've been hearing quite a bit about, all of the pushback on DEI in Florida, but when it comes to Texas, we have not really seen much or heard much about it. And it is happening really, really quickly, and we should all be pretty concerned about it. I'll just give a little bit more context, and then Caren, you and I can just kind of talk through what's going on. And I know I had someone commented on another video that I posted recently and asked me to kind of expand upon why, why the bill that was recently proposed in Florida, why that bill against education could have potential implications on a much larger scale beyond just education. So I want to make sure we cover some of that today as well. But again, for a little bit of context, Florida, right? Again, you can go back and watch the other DEI in 5 episode where I talked about this. But in Florida, there was Ron DeSantis already pushed through the Stop Woke Act that happened last year. And that was aimed at really banning like mandatory DEI trainings in employment. So within companies and organizations, and also trying to pull back or do away with any sort of, we're going to say, critical race theory type content in the education system. It had roughly, I think, 8 sort of points that it tries to push out. Towards the end of last year, a judge actually hit pause on part of the Stop Woke Act, which I think prohibits the act from being enforced with private companies and organizations, because much of that act is very vague. It's unclear exactly what it's meant to ban. It's also interesting because on a federal level, organizations, companies are still required to create and foster inclusive workplaces, whether or not they have mandatory training. So that's that. Also happening in Florida is House Bill 999. And that bill is aimed at basically removing or taking back some of the funding that is related to DEI within the university and higher educational system, including for privately funded colleges and universities. And so that would mean essentially banning any sort of like DEI statements. So, if DEI is part of a university's statement or mission, they're supposed to be removing that. It would also include banning any sort of gender or race studies. So we're talking about entire departments being eradicated. So like African American studies, anything on women's studies, LGBTQ plus studies, gone, which means people would lose their jobs as well. Part of House Bill 999 also is designed so that the people that are, I can't even think of the word right now, not the faculty, what is the word I'm thinking of? The people that, the board members of these universities, of public universities, who are political figures in some way, would now start to have a say over the hiring process within the universities. And faculty would no longer have input, which could be very dangerous. They will also have a say over reviewing tenure for currently tenured faculty, which is something that hasn't been touched. Tenured faculty members have historically been protected. And then it would also give them permission to rewrite mission statements. So that's kind of the gist of what's going on with House Bill 999. We have some links below in the description that can give you a bit more context. Now, that's Florida. Now, when it comes to Texas, there was a directive that came from Governor Greg Abbott's office. And he basically pushed out this note saying that, they're pretty much banning anything related to DEI, saying that, anything that is being disguised as DEI when it comes to hiring or, admissions to, the universities, that they pretty much need to get rid of it. And so the reaction to that was that Texas A&M, the entire Texas A&M system, has banned DEI statements from admissions and hiring, and they're shifting now to a quote unquote more merit-based system. So job applications will only include cover letters, CVs, or resumes, statements about research and teaching philosophies, and professional references. And then just a few days ago, University of Houston announced that they are no longer considering DEI statements when they are hiring as well. So again, a reaction to the governor directed state agency making it so that they feel that they don't want to, or they want to feel as if they are complying with these laws. So there was the University of Houston chancellor said, in order to ensure compliance with state and federal law, we will not support or use DEI statements or factors in hiring or promotion anywhere in the University of Houston system. And so that is where we are right now. And I'm going to pause here. I just wanted to lay that foundation of that context. I see you over there shaking your head because you're a U of M or UH alum, right?
I am. I had got both my bachelor's degrees from the University of Houston, Clear Lake. I spent half of my time at University of Houston Central Campus. We can't call it main anymore. It's Central Campus. So yeah, I am a proud grad and alum of the UH system, and I am furious. Furious. Oh my God, I'm so furious. In listening to all of the things about, again, and like in this, all right, I'm going to take a breath so I can like calm myself back down. So I'm so mad right now. I'm so mad. All of the things about like pulling out diversity statements and kind of pulling back and making everything more of a meritocracy goes back to the original problem we had and why DEI work was so important. Because when we talk about a meritocracy, only certain people get access. So if you're looking at things like your resume, your CV, your references, what you're really doing is closing the door to people who did not already have that access. So it becomes a chicken or the egg situation where if you're in academia or if you're moving into academia, the only way that you have it is if you've had the access and privilege to already get in there. So you've already limited people who did not come from the same economic background, people who maybe came from not so great schools because frankly, their taxes didn't pay for great schools because they live in a bad environment because it's been segregated by racism. So you're compounding all of these things on top of each other. And that's why we created this work for DEI. That's why we had these statements. That's why we had these initiatives to actually level the playing field. And I think what we're finding right now is that folks are upset that we now really are finding the best candidates, and finding the best candidates aren't the ones who are grandfathered in because they went to XYZ school, or grandfathered in because they went to a place that had higher property taxes, so they went to a better school. We're finding now that the best candidates are people who look like us. The best candidates are people who are not regular ass white folks. And so now that's a problem. And so instead of you're giving vocal platitudes of what you say you want, but you're literally doing exactly the opposite because you're afraid that true equality and true equity means that you're not going to be immediately sent to the front of the line. Oh, I'm so mad.
I know. I mean, what is happening, or what should be happening when we're taking on DEI or when we're approaching DEI efforts, is that there is a shift and a rebalance of power. And a lot of people do not like that. I was checking out the Washington Examiner's article about this, about Greg Abbott pushing this. And I'll just read a little bit of what they said, because it better articulates it than I can in any way. So there was a letter addressed to Porter Wilson, the state's executive director for the employee retirement system. And Abbott Chief of Staff Gardner Pate said that federal and state law prohibit discrimination in hiring practices, and that such hiring discrimination could not be made legal simply by calling it DEI. So that's how they're pushing this out. They didn't submit a bill or anything. They're just saying that DEI is considered a form of discrimination now. And they go on to say, in recent years, however, The innocuous sounding notion of diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, has been manipulated to push policies that expressly favor some demographic groups to the detriment of others. I mean, get real here, but I'll continue. Pate wrote, indeed, rather than increasing diversity in the workplace, these DEI initiatives are having the opposite effect and are being advanced in ways that proactively encourage discrimination in the workplace, illegally adding DEI requirements as a screening tool in hiring practices, or using DEI as a condition of employment leads to the exclusion and alienation of individuals from the workplace. And so the last point I'll make here is they say this warning from the government's office, I can't help but laugh, comes as diversity, equity, inclusion efforts in higher education have drawn increased scrutiny amid reports that colleges have gone to quote unquote woke. It's like people are throwing away this whole woke and wokeness terminology, and it's so bizarre to me in so many ways. And I mean, roughly by definition, when we say woke, it's just being aware of social issues,
Mhm.
right? And being more aware of the imbalance of power and privilege, especially in this country. And again, people are fearful of a shift in power and privilege. And it's almost like we're like backtracking, not almost, we're backtracking on, I feel like we're back in like the Jim Crow era right now. It
We
is
are. We
absolutely bizarre. And then I don't know if you've been following like the whole issue in Mississippi where they're trying to restructure things with like ensuring that people are going to be policed and led by white individuals, a predominantly black state.
Yeah, yeah. One thing that I
Mm,
found that was kind of funny, not ha ha funny, but funny,
yeah,
um, was that in Florida, when DeSantis was the subject of a recent lawsuit, he and his attorney general had to define what woke was. Like they're anti woke. They had to
how'd that
define what it
go?
was. They actually defined it correctly. So being woke is to be aware and cognizant of inequities in our system and understanding the social issues that come out of the inequities in our system. That is exactly how they defined it. And so that they're anti woke, and I continue to put
Right.
that in quotation marks,
Hmm.
they're
Hmm.
anti woke is by their definition, they're saying that they do not want to be aware of social inequity. They do not want to be aware of these things. And so it's like, okay, so what you're saying is you just don't care. And
Right.
and, and like I said before, this is all being whipped up to be this cultural touchstone
Right.
as a way of just making people upset and furious about stuff. And I won't get into my political soapbox right now, but I think that what is happening is
Hmm.
that instead of taking the truly neutral tone that they say they want, because
Right.
if you ask them, what are you really looking for? They're going to say, well, we just want everybody to have an equal opportunity. We just want the best person for the actual job or the best
Bull.
person for the role. Except that that's not what they want at all. Because if they did, they absolutely would champion DEI strategies. They absolutely would
Hmm.
champion DEI initiatives because, like finding that walk-on player who becomes the star quarterback, or like
Yeah.
finding that random person in the back of the room who is just singing in the back, and all of a sudden they have this absolutely beautiful voice. That's what we're looking for in DEI. We're looking for
Hmm.
the people who have been overlooked. We're looking for the
Hmm.
people who may have been passed over previously. We're not looking for the star cheerleader. We're not looking for the star quarterback to give them another
Right.
position. We're looking for the Rudy of the group. God, I just dated myself. We're looking for the Rudy of the group to find out who is that person. And that's what
Yeah.
DEI initiatives do. They look for those people. And so
Right.
by you fighting so hard against these DEI initiatives and fighting so hard to put stuff back into the Jim Crow era, what you're really saying is, oh no, we see that there are people who actually are better than us. I've been lazy and have been just really resting on the fight that I'm white or I'm male or I'm of a certain class.
Hmm.
And now we're finding that there are people who are just as talented, just as skilled, or maybe even more skilled and talented than I am. And I don't like it.
Nope. And I want to make sure I keep my power and push it to generations that look like me. So we
Exactly.
continue. Yeah, exactly. And it's very clear, right? The agenda, at least from my perspective, is very clear. The Stop Woke Act that DeSantis has been pushing also focuses on children, right? And so, they're trying to, part of that is to ban critical race theory, which they don't even define in the act, because they keep it so vague. It's on purpose, but you read between the lines, you know what they're trying to do. And it's like, even the House Bill 999, they're trying to ensure that nothing is being taught that um, presents America as anything more than a founding nation. Baby, history, you can't rewrite history. You could try if you want to, but as soon as those children grow up, even if you don't teach them, they're going to enter into this society, and they're going to be in for a rude awakening about what the reality is, and the fact that everything in this country has been built on race and the backs of Black people. Like, you cannot, the country would not be as it is today had there not been slavery. And literally every system and process that exists in our society of Western culture in the States is built with inequities. Full stop. It's built to support and advantage white folks. Full stop. And none of those systems have been changed. And we're constantly running into issues and seeing how, even like our legal system, how it's not up to date. Like, taking a step back, taking race and all of this aside, like, there's a whole situation going on right now in Congress where they're trying to figure out what responsibility tech companies have as it relates to our super antiquated law that came about back when we had dinosaurs roaming the earth. Like, hello. Like, so there's just like this big mess, and it's very clear that people are fearful. They're fearful of white people, more specifically, that are in these positions of power, are fearful of losing their power. DeSantis in particular is pushing an agenda. He's leveraging Florida for his presidency or potential run. He just released a book, which is now a New York Times bestseller, which is just like, are we for real?
If you and your organization buy enough books, even if you just end up storing them in a warehouse, you too can be a New York Times bestseller.
If you got the coins, power and privilege, power and privilege. But it's all, I generally try to avoid being political, but at this point, we're starting to get into a place where we don't have a choice, especially working in the DEI space. And I know part of what we wanted to cover today is like, why is this so important for us to be aware of when we, you and I, even, we're not working in education per se or in higher ed. We are very much working with organizations and corporations, but it's all interconnected. And, again, the Stop Woke Act isn't just about the educational system. It was directly for and designed for employers to start to take into consideration, hey, you shouldn't be forcing people to take DEI trainings, which I agree. If people don't want to come to DEI trainings, bye. No. I am not here to force you or no. But for the folks that are interested in learning more and wanting to do better and to change systems, why? Why are you trying to ban it?
And Adriel, I think you make a really good point here. And I think that that's a point that, frankly, a number of practitioners have kind of missed, that it isn't forced. Like I have told, because I've had clients ask me, well, should we make this mandatory? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. It is absolutely optional. If you want to do this, this is great. However, I will say that DEI needs to be fundamental into how you operate as a business.
Yes.
But if somebody doesn't want to come to a psychological safety training, feel free not to.
Right.
Feel free not to.
Right.
But at the same time, what are you doing to make sure that everybody on your team and everyone in your organization is feeling seen and heard? If you want more help on how to do that, then maybe the psychological safety training might be helpful for you.
Right.
But again, if you don't want to do that, have at it. Everything that I know I offer as a consultant and practitioner, everything is a recommendation. Everything is a recommendation. And it is my responsibility and role to show you, based on industry best practices, what you should do. Right. But what you do is up to you.
Right. I think it's challenging too, in that, and you made a good point, is like, how ingrained is DEI into your organization? Is it part of your values? And if so, as you are hiring people, or let's say you just now decided to try to bake DEI into your values, you then have to reflect on the current people that are there and look to see if their values are aligned with the organization. And if they're not, then what are you going to do? You have to then consider making some tough decisions. And I don't know, years ago when I first started doing this work, I was like, yes, this should be mandatory. Now, absolutely not. But then it's like for your leaders that decide not to show up or do any of the work, how does that work? Because they're the ones that are influencing and setting the tone for the company culture and whether or not people are going to be included or feel included. And so again, tough decisions. Do you just keep those people? Most organizations do because they're making the money. And then meanwhile, you have all these individual contributors. I see it time and time again that are like, we can't stand this leader. They don't support us. They don't help. They don't include us. They don't do this. But the other leaders are complacent. They're like, well, we see that, but they're helping. Do you know how many people could come in here and do their job and be inclusive leaders? Like, come on now. But again, power and privilege.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what I find the most distressing is not the people who are like DeSantis and the people who are actively pushing back against, I don't want to be woke. Because frankly, I grew up in Texas. I'm always happy when somebody shows their hand. I'm always happy when somebody shows their hand because I know how to deal with them. I am more distressed by those who are willing to go along to get along. I am more distressed by those who feel like, well, I agree too, but I just don't want to say anything, or I don't think so.
I don't feel like it's my place because I'm not diverse. So
right, I love that. But yeah, these would be the same people who, as soon as something hits home for them, they want everyone to ride. They want the cavalry to ride in and to come and save them, but they are too overclamped and too flummoxed to actually say anything themselves. But yet, it's just not important enough. And so I am more distressed as a person and a practitioner by those who are willing to sit on the fence. I'd much rather have a person say it with their whole chest, because at least I know. I think the other thing that is distressing me, because I just came off of a project with the federal government. And I think the thing that is also interesting for me to keep an eye on over the next few months, how this is going to conflict with what the government is doing in terms of DEI. Because President Biden just released an executive order on February 21, with an update of last June's executive order. I want to say 14035. I think it's the numbers. That's good. Like 14035 is the last year, and then we just dropped one on the 21st. Dropped it like it's a mixtape.
I love it. Biden on the track,
right? And part of those executive orders, especially this most recent one, I want to say Section 7 or 8. Y'all, I actually read these things through.
I'm over here Googling.
I actually read and save all of these things.
Yeah.
That work specifically talks about actually like bringing in more diversity and actually doing it on the federal level. So Section 8 is affirmatively advancing civil rights. And that's not just for the organizations itself, but they're looking to start within the federal government to provide templated work for employers and for other institutions. So that's the goal. You start with the Fed government, you work yourself out. So I'm curious to see how that conflict is going to come up. Like all this stuff doing on a state level, how is that then going to conflict on a federal level?
Definitely. And I'm just so curious. I know we were really talking about like the DEI ban, but my brain keeps going back to what's going on in Mississippi and how little like we've been talking about it. And I mean, all of these things are really interconnected, but first and foremost, 15% of residents in Mississippi are permanently barred from voting. And Mississippi has like the highest percentage of Black residents in the entire country. I think it's like 40% of Mississippi is Black. No surprise there, because again, critical race theory, baby. Like, it makes sense, but y'all don't want to hear it. Anyways, I did not know. I just saw this as I was looking up the executive order, but the Mississippi Senate okayed that bill to expand police in the majority Black state capital of Mississippi. And and this is part of what's going on over there is creating even more restrictions on voting rights and freedom, which is again going to directly impact Black people. And so I, there's just so much to follow and so much to keep track of, and it's so overwhelming. And I'm just so curious, especially with that executive order, how are these states going to be navigating this as individual states versus still complying with the federal laws that are in place? Are we going to see states try to like go independent?
Again, are we
again, right?
Are we trying to talk about another
California.
national divorce, if you will?
Oh, we're gonna have our own version of Brexit, I guess. I don't know. Oh my goodness,
Well,
it's so hard to wrap your head around it.
It really is. And you and I both live in very blue states. And I put that in quotation marks because I know that
right.
we live in cities that are very
Yes.
blue. But because of the cities that we live in, it influences the states that we live in.
Right.
But what happens? What happens? Because we also know that both of the states that we live in are considered donor states. And so if states like Mississippi were to engage in a national divorce, we'll call it, where your money gonna come from, bro? Because it's
already struggling.
It's coming from places like New York and Illinois. Where your money come from, bro?
And we're already struggling. We're struggling. Everybody's struggling. Like the rent is high, the eggs are high. Like it's just
look.
It keeps going. It keeps going. And I mean, national debt right now is ridiculous, especially for millennials. I've been following just like the fintech industry and how we have the like buy now, pay later, which is like our digitized layaway that is eating us alive, but people don't see it because you don't have that like physical credit card, or you don't have that like tap and pay on your device. It feels
not real.
I don't know. You feel disconnected from it, but it's real and people are racking up debt. We still don't have any solve for student loans. It's just rent keeps increasing, groceries keep increasing, services keep increasing, healthcare, which
and then the weird things, like all of these things are increasing, but yet inflation is going down. The employment rate is the lowest it's been in decades. So if you were to look at the things that should cause prices to go up are things that are not causing prices to go up. So what's really happening is that folks are just pushing the lever just to see how much.
Just to see what happens.
But
the employment. Go ahead.
I was going to say, because there's so much uncertainty, and I'm going to tie this back to our other conversation.
Yes.
Because so much uncertainty, everyone is looking for something to hold on to and something to ground them into certainty. And what we are finding is our cultural issues, such as wokeness and such as all of the LGBTQIA bills that are happening, all the anti-trans bills that are happening, all of like the reverting of gay marriage bills. All of these things are cultural issues that people can hold on to because it grounds them, as opposed to looking at the fact that, people are really just trying to squeeze as much money as they can out of us. And this is awful.
Right.
And so instead you talk about wokeness. Instead you talk about the fact that you're terrified of drag queens doing anything else but entertaining people and being freaking fantastic, which, by the way, as an aside, please talk to your legislatures about all of the anti-trans bills that are out there and all of the anti-drag queen bills that are out there. Entertainment is not a crime. What these queens are literally doing are the things that we used to do as a community, and we're no longer doing as a community. They are supporting marginalized people and people who are out on the edges. Please talk to your legislators. Please talk to each other about this. This is nonsense. Sorry, that's just so overside.
No, it needs to be said. What's interesting along those lines is I was connecting to our good old interwebs, but like those deep fake videos, have you seen those? Like the one where it's like the performers in front of a classroom of kids. I am astonished by how many people don't have critical thinking skills to realize that those are not real videos. Like I looked at the comment sections of some of them and the amount of people that were like, those parents and those educators should be ashamed. Like, seriously? But those are the folks that have power, that are going to the polls and that are voting for this ridiculousness. And it's just mind blowing. Like, it's really sad. It's really sad. And it's just even more sad that people can't mind their business and like let people live as they see fit.
Exactly. But again, it goes back to what we were saying before, that, you know, if you're so concerned and so overwhelmed by the fact that there are other people who are starting to step up who are not you, and there are other people who are shining brightly with all of the oppression and all of the things that they've had to overcome, whether they're
Yeah.
members of the LGBTQ plus community, whether they're Black folks, whether they're Asian, whether they're Latina, and whatever they are, they're now starting to step up and to show you how amazing they've always been.
Yeah.
And you are terrified by that. Instead of you stepping your own stuff up, and I had to check what I normally say. Instead of you stepping your own stuff up,
Yep.
you spend all of your time trying to re-push people back down. And so every
Yeah.
time I see this, everything from Jim Crow to the anti-trans bills to the LGBTQ plus stuff to all these DEI initiatives, all I see is fear. All I
Yes.
see is terror. All I see
Yes.
is shame and embarrassment because my stuff ain't good enough. And
Yeah.
instead of me doing the American thing and working hard or pulling myself up by my bootstraps, instead of doing those things, I'm just now going to change the rules of the game. And
Right.
to me, that is so incredibly un-American. That is so
Yeah.
un-American.
It really is. It really is. But you know what I think is one of our really big problems is that we have all of these leaders who are pushing these agendas forward and sharing things like deep fakes that misrepresent drag queens, the trans community, etc. And people are gullible and lack critical thinking skills and they're buying into it. I mean, in the States, I think nearly some 60% of adults in America have a literacy level of 6th grade level and below.
Mhm.
Those are the people with the power that are voting in a lot of instances. And I mean, I read some of this stuff, these policy changes and bills and things, and as well read as I am and educated, I sometimes I'm like, what the heck does this say? What is this? Like even going to vote, like the ballot sometimes, if I don't research ahead of time, even when I do research and I get there and I'm like, say what now? What
Mhm.
they're designed to trip people up and confuse people. And politicians are very good at knowing how to manipulate and speak to people in a certain way to get them to buy in and create hate towards groups that are again minding their business as you should be, like,
Mhm.
and it is anti-American at the end of the day, which what is American at this point? Right, like I don't even know. It's
Mhm.
so much to
Yeah.
unpack.
Yeah. And I think what has me the angriest and the most flummoxed, if you will,
Hmm.
is for a group of people who are working so hard to define what American culture is, because this is really
Hmm.
what we're doing. We're working very hard to define what American culture is.
Make
Despite,
America great again.
right, despite American culture being an incredibly fluid and changeable thing like that, the fact that it is fluid is American culture.
Hmm.
Um, and the fact that these people who are trying so hard to define it are doing the exact opposite of what they are trying to define it as. So it goes to your point of being able to manipulate language and being able to manipulate it to say what you want. It's like for
Right.
someone who spends so much time talking about pulling yourself up by your bootstraps and making do and working hard and doing everything you got to do, all
Yep.
of these marginalized communities are literally doing that and are
Hmm.
starting to see some success. And instead of you cheering them on, instead of you saying, this is what truly makes America great, you're changing the rules of the game so that they're punished for doing what you've asked them to do.
Drops mic. All
I
facts.
I have
All
been I have
facts.
been on one all week long. I have been on one.
Oh, you and I both. I'm like every day there's something else. I recently started co-hosting a podcast called Leadership. If you haven't subscribed yet, it's available on
So good.
all
So
platforms. Please check us out. Co-hosting with my good friend Caleb Gardner, who is a change, social change expert, author, amongst other things. But we've been having some real conversations um, about this, and it's there's just so much to unpack. But this week, today's episode, we were talking about healthcare and, um, again, such an un-American thing where people are traveling outside of the states, have been in droves for years for, discounted procedures, medications. I mean, we're talking 50% off for insulin if you travel up to like Canada. It's just, why am I doing that? And I'm already paying out of pocket for health insurance. Like I say it all the time. Health insurance in this country is one of the biggest, if not the biggest scam, but that's not what we're talking about today. I'm already on one from earlier. I was telling Caren that I had an incident with my health insurance where I've been seeing a provider, my therapist, since October. And last week they were like, "Oh, yeah, I don't think we actually accept your plan. So you're gonna have to." This is like a third party system. They're like, "Oh, you're gonna have to work it out with your provider to figure out something." And I'm like, "So you expect me to backtrack all the way from October to pay my therapist for all the sessions? Because this work that I do, I need weekly sessions. Because y'all listen." So it should be interesting what happens. I don't know what's about to happen, but if this is the case, if what they've told me is true, I'm probably looking upwards to like, I don't know, $5,000-$8,000 out of pocket to pay my therapist for all the sessions we've had.
Mm-hmm. And we'll talk about this offline, but yeah, literally went to 2 doctors on Tuesday. And yes, we are moving forward, but this is what our conversations are like. So get into it.
Yes. Zip, zip, zip.
So literally went to 2 doctors on Tuesday and went to an ENT because I've been losing my voice. And as someone who's paid to talk, been losing my voice, and found the doctor through the Blue Cross website. In network, great, fantastic. This is why I went to that one. Get there. Oh no, I'm sorry, you're out of network. I was like, but it's on the website that you're in. Oh no, they haven't updated their provider profiles. So I paid out of pocket for that. Then went to go see my gynecologist for my well woman and to get a new IUD because again, women's health is important.
Happy Women's History Month.
Only to find out that my IUD is not covered. And I called them yesterday. I was like, wait, what do you mean my IUD is not covered? Like what? I don't. So guess who gets to pay $2,000? $2,000.
Blue Cross Blue Shield. That's who I have as well. Horrible.
And I cannot tell you how thankful I am that I have the privilege of being able to own my own consultancy, to be able to have put aside money, to have been able to be in a financial situation where that money is not going to be detrimental to me. So and openly admitting that is absolutely a privilege. So when we talk about privilege, that is also a vector of privilege.
We all have levels of privilege.
Exactly. And so I am so thankful that I am privileged enough that is not going to be a hit for me. But I sure as I'll get out.
Yeah, but you got to replenish that emergency savings fund because you never know. Like, even though you don't feel it right now, like, knock on wood, God forbid, you need some bigger expense to cover. And that's the case for so many Americans. I mean, a lot of Americans, good majority of Americans don't even have $400 or $500 put aside for emergencies.
Mm-hmm.
It's terrifying. Like we are all, if you're not a paycheck away, you might be 2 or 3 away from being homeless out here these days. And it is really unfortunate.
Yeah. Honest to God. But again, and because I spend all of my time connecting dots, all of these things are connected. So I know. I know we started talking about like the bands and that kind of thing, but because you have those bands means that you're not going to actually open the door to hire all sorts of people who truly are the most qualified for the roles. And you're truly going to not have rules for initiatives that actually really open the door for everybody, which means that marginalized people are going to have less opportunity, which means marginalized people are going to have less money, which means that they're going to be more likely if something happens that they're going to be truly in a financial bind. So there's your connection.
Oh yeah, for sure.
All the way to, I may not have enough money to pay for my IUD.
Yeah, it's sad times. And then, I mean, again, we're off subject here, but listen to Leadership, the episode that dropped today. We were talking about the abortion situation and how Walgreens has decided not to provide some of the abortion pills in some states, which is
Oh, you heard they backtracked in California, right?
Oh, look at that.
Yeah. So what they did was
Interesting.
they said they weren't gonna methylprednisolone, I think it is, and so
Uh-huh.
the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, was like, cool. So we're not going to use you as a preferred provider anymore. And California is
Cool.
the fourth largest economy in the world. And they were like, oh, well, then we're just not going to deal with you then. And then all of a sudden they backtracked real quick and they were like, well, see what happened was, and so,
Unreal.
yeah,
Unreal.
so they're walking some of that back because
Yeah.
California was like, bet.
Cool. Cool, 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 cool. We got you. Heard you, sis.
Yeah. And
Oh
that
goodness, I gotta go follow up on it. I know Elizabeth Warren was and her squad was trying to push Walgreens as to get an explanation. Like, why are you doing this when all of these other like CVS, Kroger, all of them are still offering it, despite them also receiving that threatening letter, quote unquote. So, yeah, I'm definitely curious. I'm gonna go check it out.
that's
Um,
super duper reason. Like that happened in like the past couple of days. So that's super.
Okay, okay. I gotta check it out. Yeah, DEI in 5 turns into like DEI in 45 today, but
As always.
this my channel. We do what we want to do here. So you watch what you watch. You don't watch what you don't want to watch. It is what it is. But to wrap us up, what are some things that you think people could be doing to? Of course, my dog wants to start keeping up noise right when I'm ooh, child. Um, what are some things that you think people could be doing in response to the DEI bans that we're seeing and anything else,
Um,
as individuals?
I think the one thing, and I mentioned this earlier, is not to be quiet. Not to be quiet. And especially if you are someone who's already in the halls of power or you have access to the
Mm-hmm.
halls of power. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Mm-hmm.
talking about all you well-meaning white people in particular.
Yeah.
It's your time to shine. It's your time to be just as loud and as vocal as you were with those black squares a couple of years ago,
Mm.
but to go and actually go talk to your legislators. And if you don't know who that is, that's your first step. Go find out who your legislators are. Go talk to your universities. If you're an alum of these universities, like I now have letters to write, but if you're an alum of these universities, and especially if you're an alum, make your voice heard because they want your money. So
Yes.
let them know, hey, I'm not giving you anything as an alum unless you fix this.
That part. That part.
And
Absolutely.
and also start making sure people understand what is actually going on. If they see a deep fake, let them know it is a deep fake. Now you don't have to shame them into it. But
Mm-hmm.
just
Mm-hmm.
say, where are you getting this information from?
Mm-hmm.
Where else have you heard that from? That seems weird that I've never seen this anywhere else. Make them do that work. And I know for a fact, the second you challenge people and force them to explain where things come from, they stop saying it, or they're like, oh, I guess you're right. I didn't really pay as much attention to it. And again, you're
Mm-hmm.
not shaming them, but
Right.
you're forcing them to actually think. So
Absolutely.
talk to folks, be just as loud, be brave enough to say something. If you're an alum, put your money where your mouth is and call people out on their BS.
Right, right. And I think it's so important for people to realize. I know early on we were focused on, why this will impact historically marginalized people. White folks, this hurts you too. This is directly impacting freedom of education, freedom of speech, all of the things we've been talking about from the Stop Woke Act to the House Bill 999 to people banning things. Like, all of this to voting rights being challenged, right? Like when we're talking about voting rights, like looking back, we were looking at voting rights for women, voting rights for black people and everyone else. It affects us all and we have to be mindful of it. And even if you don't feel the direct impact right now, someone or someone within your network is going to be impacted by it. And I think, Caren, you make an excellent point. Like, this is the time for leaders to step it up. I know there's some leaders that are like, when it comes to DEI right now, they're like, we don't know when to say something or if we should address this. Well, here's your chance, because now we're not just pinpointing a specific identity or group of people. We are talking about DEI overall and how it impacts us all. And so speaking up, and if you have decided that DEI is important to your organization or a part of your values, you should be having these conversations, and you should be, even if you're not an expert on DEI, leading those conversations, or at least, just dropping hints to people to say, hey, have you been talking to other leaders? Have you been following what's going on as it relates to DEI? What are your thoughts? Have discourse around it. Initiate that, create spaces for that to happen. It's not about it being perfect discussions, you being an expert on how to solve for this. It's just getting the information out there. If your platform is LinkedIn, I know a lot of leaders use that. Post on LinkedIn, share this information, reshare this video, help people understand. A lot of people don't even know what's going on. Like I said early on, all the stuff going on in Texas, it's like they were like boop on a little domino and just, and mainstream media, not much coverage. Most of the like articles that we're linking in the comments, the description, most of those are like local Texan newspapers and media outlets. There's not really much coverage. We've seen a little bit more with Florida, and that's because, again, DeSantis probably going to be running for Republican candidate. But that aside, virtually nothing with Texas. So more people need to be aware of what's going on, how they are manipulating the system to create this ban. Again, it was not in Texas. It was not through a bill. They just said that, DEI is directly discriminating against folks, and that is illegal. That's how they positioned it, which is so dangerous. I can't say it enough. But all right, let me step off my soapbox and scene.
Yes.
Oh, goodness. Any last words, thoughts, things you want to share?
Y'all, we're going into some pretty dark times. We're
Yeah, we're already here.
I think it could get worse before it gets better.
But, yeah.
But I'm that kind of pessimist. I'm going to say two things. One, we always talk about where we would be in certain moments in history. This is one of those moments. So where are you going to be in history? Yeah. The other thing I would say is let's talk to and listen to our elders who did this before. Our elders who did this in the 50s and 60s. First of all, I'm sure they're incredibly disappointed that we're here again.
Oh, yeah.
But what did they do? And how can we learn the lessons from what they did to push back? Because apparently we're spinning this wheel again. Yep. So, yeah, those are the last two things I would say. This is now your moment in history, y'all. This is your moment in history. What are you going to do about it?
Yep. We all have a part to play. So we're going to keep having these discussions. That's part of the work that you and I are doing. I've been talking about this a lot, and I'm sure some people are sick of hearing it, but I don't really care. So you can subscribe. But no, it is so important that we keep having these conversations. And yeah, unfortunately, I think history often repeats itself. So I think you made a really, really great point about just checking in with our elders to see like what can we do? Help us. A lot of them have left the blueprints for us. So even picking up a book, I know a lot of people are distracted by the interwebs, but there's a lot of good resources in books. So 10 out of 10 recommend that. All right. This has been another episode of DEI in 5. Again, more like DEI. Oh, we're pushing like 50 minutes, but it is what it is. Hope you enjoyed this video. Let us know what you think. Feel free to add a comment to keep the discussion going. And I will see you. Oh my gosh, I thought it was Friday. I'll see y'all tomorrow for another episode. Thanks again for tuning in. Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And until later, y'all. Bye. All right.